All right, it's another day of doing the Homeric Rhapsody thing. So again, what I'm doing here is not necessarily trying to recite the Iliad, word for word, for whatever that might mean. In English, I'm also not necessarily trying to create an entirely new work. I am merely upholding the ancient tradition of oral poetry, which is to say that you're reciting from memory stories and composing a work based on a framework in real time. So I guess the closest, I've mentioned before, the closest equivalent that we know today, because writing does not work that way anymore. You write something down, you forget about it, and that's done. Or you revise it, but you don't work off memory only. The closest thing is like jazz music, which is to say that there is a base, thing that's been passed down through many people, but everybody who performs it has a different take on it. So it's kind of similar to that, except obviously jazz music is also written down, so it's more freeform than that. Okay, let's keep going. We're currently in book 2. That fateful assembly, goddess, had been initiated. The men had all scattered, and Agamemnon and his underlings and all his captains had somehow, with Odysseus's help, and above that, the great goddess Athena, flashing gray eyes, had helped to bring them all back. Now the men once again, grudgingly this time, had assembled at the place, and before any could speak, one from near the front, somehow having pushed his way up near the beginning and near the speaker Agamemnon, had spoken. Thersites it was, the man reviled by Achilles and by Odysseus, who he had many times been wont to offer his criticisms. All the men in the army hated this man, his head shaped conically, with hair coming out in patches, his back arched, his shoulders hunched, and his legs different lengths so that he hobbled everywhere. This man not a sight to see, neither was he a sight to listen to. The men may have agreed some, and may have chuckled to themselves along with him in private, but certainly when he spoke out among assemblies, he was adored by no one. Thus spake Thersites. Agamemnon, you bring us out here, you tell us to leave, and now you drag us back. What is it you want? Do you want us to go out and fight the Trojans now? Do you want us to bring more war booty and more loot to store and enrich your coffers? Why, if Achilles were here, he would show you what's what. Do you mean to take another one of our prizes? I will bring women back from Troy, and you take them for your own. You always get the best cuts of meat, the best of the prizes, the best of the women slaves, and yet for what do we fight among this army? Do we risk our lives, never seeing you among the front lines with us? Nay, we should all offer you a taste of your own medicine, put you in the front lines among the men, and have you show your worth, whatever that may be. All were stunned at this. Thersites has spoken his mind as he was wont to do, and yet it did not please a single heart. No matter how much men have been agreeing in private about just such a thing, it was not meet to speak so wantonly in front of all the men, in front of all the captains, and least of all, in front of the great Lord Marshal himself. Before Agamemnon replied, as it would not be right for a king to even address such a thing, Odysseus spoke up, getting his back up, and said, "You cowering dog, Thersites, How can you presume to speak to the great Lord Marshal Agamemnon? Do you think that any of us care what you think of the army's condition? We all know our lot, we all know our orders, and it is not for you to question them. Maybe Achilles might do so, though you see how far that has gotten him, chewing on his wrath in his tent as his men play quoits and stand in the sand waiting for battle. He, I can assure you, is not happy, and you will be even less so. Odysseus took up his staff, the staff of office that Agamemnon had lent him, and he struck Thersites along the back, opening up wheels of blood among his back and his sides. Thersites was crouched over and trying to escape as he continually received blows, and his tears fell along with his screams. The men chuckled at this. Finally, their stress relieved, the situation contained, and some semblance of order restored. Some of the men cried out, "Of all the things Odysseus has offered to us, of all the great stratagems and plans and plots and achievements he has won in battle, this surely is the best thing that he has done for the army." Yea, all the men had returned to some semblance of their former mirth and happiness, and thus it was that Agamemnon spoke, the situation having been brought back in his favor. "Men, you have gone through the trial and come somewhat wanting. However, I think the fact that you are all here now stands for quite enough. We have been here, yes, for 9 long years. It would be a test for any man, even someone who is away from his wife and children on a 1-month journey and gets stuck in a storm and is delayed by weeks and further weeks, will be clawing at the walls of his pentaconter and asking the gods to send him home. Yet we have been here for many, many times that amount. Yea, this is quite a test, and not even is it something that seems fair to me. I have been promised by Zeus to be able to take the city. If we were to measure up all the Achaeans and all the Trojans, assigning 10 Trojans to be the cupbearer of 1 Achaean, even so would some of the Achaean men be without someone to draw their wine. That is how much we outnumber these Trojans. Yes, they have brought with them many helpers from other lands, speaking other tongues, but that is just so. We are unified. We are one nation, even if we all be from different contingents and different countries. We speak the same tongue, and we share our strategies together. The Trojans, though they may be similar in numbers, with all of their helpers, everyone is sundered from one another. Everyone speaks a different language, and no one is organized, nor are they disciplined, as I have seen among all these men. I would not trade a single one of you, Thersites perhaps excepted. All the men laughed at this. And Agamemnon continued, I would not trade a single one of you for any other soldier under the sun, not even the great heroes of our previous forefathers' times, Heracles, or Perseus, or any of these great masters of combat. All of you serve me willingly and faithfully. Now, let us get on our war gear and make the final preparations for war. As Nestor has advised, we shall all be organizing by clan, with the greater men in the middle and the lessers in the middle, and the greater men surrounding them. Take up your weapons, men. We shall take Troy tonight. Thus, all the men clambered back to their tents, with hearts enraged against those Trojans and inspired to take part in glorious combat, to do their part and contribute to the great cause of Achaia. Such had never been seen in the years before. Such a longing which had been brought into their hearts, perhaps by some god, was now burning at them, and before any of them could even think of such a thing, they were longing for the fight more than even they wanted to see their homes again, see their wives and clutch their babies in their hands. Babies had they been when they had left, though now they would be grown to full childhood. Thus stood all the men as they assembled on that shore. So straight were their ranks, you could draw a leveling rod across them, and not one rood of it would have a single gap where the men would not have stood. So close were they that their helmet crests touched. The beach was verily thronged and littered and overwhelmed with men. Down below in Hades, the great horseman Death trembled to hear the quaking of their feet and was anticipating the battle to come. From all the great lands of Achaia, these men had drawn. Such a great host could never be recited by any poet. Not if I had 10 tongues could I tell of every man who stood at this assembly. But I shall endeavor to name the captains and the places from which they come with their contingents. From thirsty Argos came the great horseman, the horse-breaker, Tydeus' son, Diomedes. He came with a contingent of Argives from all of his various lands, bringing with him 50 ships, well decked and ready with rowers and fighters and men willing to do their part. From Salamis came the giant Ajax, son of gods it seemed, but a man only had been his father, Telamon, who, though he a mortal himself, had fought alongside the great Heracles at just this same battlefield of Troy. Ajax brought with him 30 well-benched ships, and men worth twice as much of many another country, and with bulk almost approaching the size of himself, though not a man there save Achilles could boast that he was anywhere near Ajax's might. From fertile Pylos, sandy Pylos, where Neleus had grown his kingdom high, came Nestor, great counselor of the Achaeans, and the legendary man who had seen 3 generations go by. He had come through 3 generations and seen all sorts of combat and all sorts of tactics and stratagems. That Lord Nestor, who was always at the right hand of Agamemnon, came from Pylos with 90 well-benched ships, many thirsty and lusty fighters willing to take part in the trying combat and the crossing of blades. From there, from Locris, came Ajax the Lesser, as he is called. He, being much smaller than Ajax the Greater, was yet one in name and often one in heart, fighting together with his friend and his brother in name and arms. He came with 15 well-benched ships from that land of Locris. And from rocky Ithaca came Odysseus, son of Laertes, master craftsman, man of many minds. Odysseus it was who had made many a plan and helped the Argives out of more situations than they could count. He came with his many 30 ships from Ithaca land, and comes now with great counsel, worth many a man in itself. After this was from fertile Phthia Achilles, though he did not stand in assembly. He was one of the ships and one of the greatest contingents. Achilles it was who brought his Myrmidons, great fighters they be, who came from that land of Phthia, of horses and of lovely women. His men had now stood on the beach playing at quoits and playing games among themselves, dice and other such merriments as they tried to pass the time and nursed in their breasts that longing for war which would not be granted them by their captain. Beyond this was great Menelaus, brother of Agamemnon, son of Atreus, who hailed from Sparta, land of lovely women. Menelaus and his Spartans numbered 40 ships. And from here we had Protesilaus, who came in his ships and was the first to land on the Trojan shores. Protesilaus fated also to be the first to die. He was speared by a spear cast by a Trojan as he landed on that sand, and all his men wailed. Though they did not entirely lack a captain, brave Podarces was he who stood in for his brother, and Podarces it was who led them even now, a very brave and valiant man, though the men still missed their former captain Protesilaus the Greater, whose wife even now tore her hair and tore her lovely fair cheeks as she sat in the new-built bower only half completed, as they had only just been wed. After this, the great Lord Machaon and his brother, Machaon's brother, they hailed with 20 ships, and others besides, many a captain from Crete, Idomeneus, who came many a league across the sea with 40 ships, that great land of the labyrinth and many sandy shores. There was many a captain who stood at that assembly. Many were organizing their men, giving them orders on how to stand, how to fight. And who was it among these who had the greatest of the horses? And who was the strongest of the men? The horses, it was Diomedes, who had the great steeds among him, that swift as the wind could travel, yea, after Achilles' own. Achilles it was who had the greatest horses among the Argives and the greatest strength, but he stood in his tent, nursing his wrath. Greatest of the men after Achilles was that giant, towering man, Ajax, carrying a shield of another time, standing almost as tall as he was. 3 cubits it was, or more, and stood like a tower among the men. 7 ox hides were bound about it, protecting his flesh, though many a man to look at him might think that the bitter bronze would but bounce off such a magnificent form as his. Thus all the Achaeans were assembled. They all began their march, and they stood as one for but a moment before beginning toward the city. A great quake was occurring. None of the men made even a sound. So disciplined were they, and so fine in their ranks, that all the men stood and marched as one. Thus was the glory of the men of Achaia. All right. Some nice little moments, I guess. I put the Thersites thing in there, which was nice. It's funny because I'll remember stuff later that I had forgotten to put in before. There's a whole thing where like Achilles takes the staff and talks about its lineage and stuff, and there's a thing where Agamemnon, or where rather, I think it was Odysseus who talks about how even men who are away from their wives for a month and are caught by a storm will, they won't be able to bear it, and yet they've been there for 9 years, and so that they must be missing their wives even more. That's usually Odysseus' thing, but I actually interestingly put it into Agamemnon's mouth for this, using that and also the thing about how the Trojans all have sundered languages from each other, instead of the way he uses it in the story to then become like a motivational speech from him, which you don't really get a lot of indications of why Agamemnon is a good leader, or generally just the idea is that he's not a good leader. But there must be some reason why he's like able to gather so many different clans together. So I thought it'd be interesting to turn that into a speech that then motivated the men. So that it was like he was taking them down to then bring them back up, and it seemed to work pretty well in my story. The thing about the Trojans that he says, where he says like in the one that we know as the Iliad, he's complaining. It's part of the thing that makes him say he's giving up on the army. Like, oh, well, if, we have 10 times more guys than the Trojans do, more than that, so why can't we beat them? Zeus is against me. He brought in all these contingents from other lands that are helping them. Now they have equal numbers to us. But I thought it was interesting that he's saying like, yeah, they do have equal numbers to us, but we have the advantage that we're all, one language and able to coordinate so well, which is also another thing that often happens in the story. Homer doesn't usually take sides that much for Achaean or Trojan, which is interesting considering that he is one of those two, nationalities or whatever. So that you would think that he would be like on the side of the Achaeans and kind of like making the Trojans look like fools. But one thing that he does do is that the Achaeans he stresses that they're more disciplined in the way that they approach the battle, like not screaming and shrieking and stuff like the Trojans do. So I thought that would be interesting to have Agamemnon actually, talk about how the men are so good because they do that type of thing, that they're so disciplined, and saying like he wouldn't trade them for anything, I also think is interesting. I think the characterization of Agamemnon in this part, I did a pretty good job with, which, again, I don't plan any of this stuff. This all is coming from right off the spur of the moment, which is as authentic as I think I can make it to how a real rhapsode would do it. But it comes out of the muse or wherever it comes from, and I thought that one worked pretty well. Then we did the catalog of ships, which I was kind of dreading, because I would not remember any of the stuff. And as I expected, I didn't really remember any of the details there's a lot of like specific details of which cities and places in Argos and all these different places where they assembled from and what the terrain is like and all these different things, which I didn't remember. I never would have remembered that. Also didn't remember the number of ships that each one brought, except for I think Nestor definitely brought 90. I also forgot to mention Mycenae, which is Agamemnon's contingent, which has like 100 ships and is the biggest one. And I totally didn't even mention that one. And I also left out a bunch. Some of the lesser ones, Machaon's area, Protesilaus, I couldn't remember where they came from. And then there's a bunch of contingents I know I just forgot. I also forgot Menestheus, which is interesting because a lot of people think that Menestheus was originally not even in the story, that it was superimposed later because of the Athenian king who wanted to, kind of like make them look better to the annals of history afterwards, which is kind of interesting. But so I guess in that sense, maybe it's more authentic that I left him out. I don't know. But I got in a lot of them, and that was good. I did the thing too early where Hades was quaking in his lair. It also seems weird that he would just be scared of a big bunch of people walking. Like, I think in the story he quakes because of some kind of battle of the gods or something. I can't remember what it is exactly, but it definitely didn't happen here. I would probably not have done that. If I do it again, I wouldn't do that here. And I didn't do a lot of Homeric similes and stuff for the men assembling. I already kind of did it, and I didn't really know where to go with this one. But again, overall, I'm relatively happy with it. I'm happy to at least have attempted the catalog of ships, and I did an okay job of like an abridged version of it. Who's to say what's abridged, though, in oral poetry? One day I was just reading a book about Milman Parry. After starting this oral poetry thing, I was like, I want to read more about Milman Parry. And the book, Hearing Homer's Song, where they were talking about the guys in Yugoslavia who would tell these stories, and they would have them do it 3 times. And there would be entire discrepancies. Like, a character gets killed in one part that's not dead, and he like does all these other things in a different version of the story, and in one of them there's like a really important scene that then in the next version is like almost entirely glossed over, and so, and who's to say which is the correct version? That none of them are. That it's all one big conglomerate of being a correct version. So yeah, I don't know, just getting my thoughts out there about this, and I think I'm doing pretty well in sticking to it. Still not like very fluid with the way that I tell the story, and I could be adding a lot more flavor text to a lot of this. But again, the only important thing is to do it every day and to keep doing it and not stop doing it. So that's what I'm doing. All right.